Okay. This is May 8th, 2025. This is a planning committee meeting to discuss the development of internal protocol. Ideally, that includes council to strategically and transparently guide redevelopment discussions and decisions involving at least the acquired and properties and city-owned vacant lots. I say at least because I do envision this protocol including demolition discussions beyond just the answered properties. But I think that's where we'd like to start.
Should I get a quick roll call?
Oh, sure.
Chair Rathmel, present. Councilmember Hotchkiss, Councilmember Kavanaugh,
present.
Councilmember Mackey is also absent, and so is the mayor. Thank you for joining us.
Present. We're also present. We're not absent.
Present. Wow. I'm so sorry. Present.
Okay, and this is, I was going to ask that. So this is the Hansroof properties that you
This is the list, yeah.
Okay. So about 24. I have a number of points and questions, but actually starting here with this list was first on my agenda as well. What would be easiest for you? Do you want to do a status on each?
I can do that.
Okay.
Let's fly out 50,000 feet here. So the settlement agreement with Ansroof that banned him from owning property in the city for 15 years. He's divesting the properties. So when we took these over, obviously some of these were in different condition than what I'm noting, but essentially each of these, and we can go one by one, we can pull them up on GIS if necessary when Sarah's back, but essentially this is where kind of things stand as of right now. There are some that have been closed out as far as our purposes and have been, sidelotted or just need to be closed on. There are some that are, I would call them in flux, where the highest and best use of the property is maybe not one that's immediately possible because of resources or partners. And then there's some that are should be strategically held for future development possibilities, and some that are just awaiting grant funding for affordable housing, whatever that is. I can go down the list basically one by one and talk about them if that would be helpful. Starting with 2 Fayette, that's a part of the pro-housing community's demolition. That block of Fayette that includes 2 and 4.5 blighted properties in need of demolition. 3 Carey Street, Code did a walkthrough there and believes that there's a potential for rehab of that property. Now that it is vacant, I've sent it to the land bank and are awaiting their interest. 3 Fayette, which is directly behind the Vines new property, there are title issues with that. It's not in city control. My hope with that is that it becomes in city control, but at the time that we did the settlement, the title issue on that would have not allowed the acquisition, and we didn't want to let one property delay that settlement.
That's the white one.
It's the one directly behind the land bank, or excuse me, the Vines property. 5 Sturgis is in eviction court. I was at the neighborhood meeting last week. The neighbors on that street would like to see that demolished. There was a lot of illegal work that was happening in the building, including the person who was there removing stairs as well without permits. Again, that's had a long history of public safety challenges too. So that would be demolished and side-lotted. 9 Mill Street, along with 11 Mill, I think is a good candidate for new construction, block by block program. It's on the south side. It's a good neighborhood. It's quite a bit of land, actually. It's a good size with the adjoining vacant lot. 12 Rutherford, again, part of the grant for pro-housing community demolition. 22 Clark on the west side, that has been demolished. There has not been any interest in side lot so far. AGEM currently owns, or is the listed owner next door. Obviously, we're not selling to that entity. So as of right now, there's no real interest.
What's that? Sorry.
AGEM, which is an Isaac Andrew LLC.
Oh.
So the AGEM properties or any of the LLCs that the Andrew own, basically our understanding is that either bank foreclosure is happening or county property tax foreclosure. So although it's in that name, it's not essentially under their control anymore. It's going through the process of foreclosure.
So I've had several conversations conversations with a constituent in the 6th district about one of the HM properties. Are they presumably all vacant at this point and moving forward in that foreclosure process? Or is the county tracking that and not something that the city's tracking?
Anything that's not on our list, I'm not tracking. I'm not sure in terms of
Reach out
vacant
to
or,
the tax record.
yeah. Because a lot of them are actually also private mortgage foreclosures as well. There's also the pending Attorney General civil suit, which is ongoing. I've requested an update on that against Andrew. So you know, 22 Clark falls in that category. 30 Thorpe, which did not actually have a residential property on it, more of like a garage. That's kind of the same thing. 31 Travis, City Council voted on. 32 Carroll is a property nearby the Vines Urban Farm. We reached out to Vines to see if they wanted to lease it. They're not interested. So, you know, right now, I don't think any of the properties that front to Susquehanna Street are owner occupied, but nonetheless, that's, you know, in the floodplain right next to Vines. So with Vines not being interested, it'd be nice to sidelot that. Probably not a buildable area in the long term, but Vines could kind of change their mind. 41 and 43.5 Clinton Street, that was approved and is moving forward as part of the First Ward Action Council project. 42 Fayette, I don't think anyone needs a reminder of what's going on there. 114, 122, and 124 Henry. These are properties that are across from the post office and nearby the former Dixie Hotel. The city does not have a contiguous kind of lineup of these properties, but one or two that are kind of missing in that. If the city was able to gain control of all of those, or one entity was able to gain control of all of those, I think it's a great site for new development of some sort of housing, townhouses, otherwise other sort of commercial development, mixed-use development, and that's been identified as part of the state district plan.
No actual plans yet, but potential.
Yeah, no plans for it. I think one of the big things is that the owner of the former Dixie Hotel property, there is one house that's in between the ones that the city owns, and then the property closest to the former Amici is bank owned, and they because they foreclosed on that. So there are multiple owners. Again,
I thought the 24 we sold to, or 124 Henry Street was sold to be to meet the parking requirements for the art.
I think those would have been
Just
206 Henry down to 210. Because the property's 206 to 210 is closer to the Elks Lodge or Moose Lodge. This is further up the street, across the street from the post office.
Yeah, but wasn't one of those included?
I don't think so. It was
Is that not ringing a bell? That
because we wouldn't have actually had ownership of these until sometime last year.
Okay.
These are the site of multiple properties that burned down while Andrew.
Yeah.
155 Murray is basically like a backyard. It's an incredibly small lot, maybe the size of this room. So that would be really side lot potential. There's no buildable possibility. 181 Hawley is owned by the land bank. It's in good shape. 182 Hawley is a really interesting property. So it's gutted on the inside and in pretty poor shape, but it's historic. Certainly the architecture is really interesting. It's a very, very large building. Binghamton University expressed some interest in potentially having it as part of an academic program. I think that the cost of construction or reconstruction on that, which would probably be something like $1.5 million, is just too much for what that they would need it for. But not crazy enough to think that you know, maybe something like that, because of its historic nature, couldn't be looked at with another partner on redevelopment. Structurally sound, but requires basically a complete rehab. It's down to the studs. 193 Matthews demolished. You know, City Council voted on that. this next tranche of Henry Street properties, again, is being utilized for the Stadium Lofts Affordable Housing Project. That's further down Henry Street. That site, if not for to support the parking requirement, it's very unlikely due to its location right next to the highway that the state would ever subsidize any sort of affordable housing on that site from a site suitability environmental standpoint. They give us grief if we're, somewhat nearby a railroad. So next to DOT property, it's not likely. But nonetheless, when that is going after the state tax credits as it did this last round, those properties were included. And then finally, 312 Main Street is a commercial property. It's a former dry cleaning business.
Grover's Pig Stand to old people.
Yeah, and we're currently negotiating with the nearby property owner on them purchasing the property, just going through what would be a value that they're looking at that.
That was an Andrew property?
312 Main,
You
yes.
randomly bought it. Whatever. Okay.
So again, basically what Andrew was doing was acquiring properties, obtaining construction or other mortgages on those properties. The mortgage company was not verifying that work was actually happening, and so he was amassing, from what I can tell, this large amount of money as long as he was acquiring new properties. Would never do any of the work, obviously, on the properties. And so as long as he was continuing to acquire properties, that gave him the ability to take out construction mortgages or other mortgages on those properties for cash flow.
Yeah, I mean, a number of us saw that firsthand as well. We were still taking rent from tenants who were in many of these properties, so he was extracting profit without putting investment in on multiple levels. So this would seem to represent, and just to confirm, all of the properties since acquisition, some sort of inspection, some sort of walkthrough. When the redevelopment is being considered, which departments are currently involved in those conversations?
Planning and economic development. And I think we go back through the list. Some of these are, I think, block by block candidates. I mean, 9 Mill Street, a lot of them aren't. And a lot of these are, again, the kind of notes in the plan that we have. Some of these are kind of just, I want to say the city doesn't really have much of a choice, but like 155 Murray, that's a side lot. We can't really do anything else with it. There's some that have, okay, there's a couple different directions that we could go. But I think the biggest thing is identifying if there are individuals who want to actually do development and do work. We put out the solicitation for block by block, let everyone know not only this list, but the other list of all vacant properties that are in the city. And meetings are happening with those nonprofit, people like Home Headquarters, Habitat for Humanity, that sort of thing. But they're going to have to say, okay, this is the property that we want, that we're good with. And once that happens, obviously we would support their application to the state for the funding if it is block by block, or if it's someone that wants to develop that's not going after state funding, that's got to come before city council and authorize the sale.
Where does code come in? So you mentioned planning and economic development. In walking through, in inspecting, is code involved?
If it's an existing property, yes, Jonathan Westgate. So 3 Carry is a good example of, code doing a walkthrough, saying, look, we think there could be potential here, and let's have, the land bank, for example, walk through and say, hey, are they interested in doing it? Obviously, we have, being funders of the land bank, we work very well with them. That's kind of, at least for me, my first choice in terms of a development partner. But a lot of these, don't have existing properties on them.
How did the city determine which ones were occupied or not occupied when the acquisition first started?
Representations were made by the Andrew's attorney as to the status of the properties. And I'm sure that it was more of an informal, if not formal. I will say that at the time of settlement, there were representations that these were not occupied, or at least there were not. And so, because our intent was not to acquire occupied properties. Obviously, that was not totally the case.
I think second question related to code. When code does a walkthrough, is anything going in writing on what, I know we ultimately for 42 Fayette eventually received something in writing. Is that happening when the inspection, when code is walking through each time, or is it more of an internal discussion?
It's more of an internal thing. Again, on these properties, I think some of them are very, very clear that they're going to have to be demolished. So it's sort of just, hey, this property is very clearly in terrible condition. It's dangerous in the neighborhood, that sort of thing. We can't continue to hold on to it. It's got to be demolished. So after that, okay, A or B, it's either it has to be demolished or it doesn't have to be demolished. If it doesn't have to be demolished, then yes, code will, do a walkthrough just to kind of determine baseline conditions of it. They're not looking to do a code inspection because it's not occupied, that sort of thing. When we do, if there's someone interested in developing it, obviously that entity would walk through the property, sometimes with an engineer architect. When Binghamton University walked through 182 Hawley, they brought folks from their architecture and buildings team to kind of a hard hat tour.
Is there a benchmark or threshold that determines that a property, you said, has to be demolished? Is there a firm metric?
No, I think a lot of this, I mean, specific as it relates to acquiring derelict properties, mainly through the Broome County foreclosure process, or this is a big thing that I did even before I was mayor. So in the last 10 plus years of experience, you start to get a pretty good idea of what can be saved, what is maybe on the fence, and then what is just not. It has to be demolished from a safety issue. The other thing too is that a lot of times we'll be hearing from neighbors at these properties. So I use 5 Sturgis as an example. Ask the neighborhood meeting, ask some residents that live on Sturgis, is that something you'd like us to try to get rehabbed? Is that something you want demolished? And it was resounding. It's been a source of light. It's been terrible. We should demolish it. And that also matches up with the illegal work that was being done that currently makes the building, not safe.
How often is there an effort to include neighbors and community members in redevelopment conversations?
Again, it kind of all depends. Again, typically speaking, and we're in a weird scenario right now because during COVID, right, Broome County was not foreclosing on properties, and actually their first foreclosure actions will be happening this year, going back to COVID, because of moratoriums of the state and the change in the Supreme Court decision. So for a 5-year period, Broome County has not been foreclosing on properties. Now, there's a whole other discussion about what impact that has had about the flip and turnover of neighborhoods. But prior to that, we would look at the list of properties. Obviously, some are strategic. We would know the condition of them. But more often than not, what would happen is neighbors would be calling us and saying, why is the city not tearing this building down? That's the number one thing that we hear.
Are there, I don't also need to monopolize the questions if folks want to ask for several, so feel free to pop in. Okay, so outside of what you represented for plans or discussions, considerations for this list, are there any that have been included in funding requests that council is that have not yet come before council? So we have 5 in the pro housing. You talked about some, but
On
are
this
there other
list?
grants? Yeah.
Let me look through quick I don't believe so, but let me just think. So again, nothing's been applied for, but I think 9 mil is a great block by block. 41 and 43.5, obviously we're funded by the state. Nothing on Henry Street. You're aware that was included as part of the affordable housing project. No.
Okay.
Well, yeah, what I represent kind of notes is a point in time.
So I think kind of, so taking a look at 22 Clark. Right now, it's an empty lot. You might be looking at it or as a potential side lot. But we have 24 Clark right next door, which I don't think is going to be rehabable probably long term. So now you have double lot. So you hold on to 22, waiting for suddenly you have what might be a nice buildable lot, maybe under our new townhouse zoning designation, something like that. So rather than having it go permanently as a side lot, I think those are the opportunities that we're hoping to capture and not let this pass by.
Yeah,
and I put a process.
of course, yes. And I think part of it too, also what makes that argument very strong. Yes.
I get complaints about that.
So another thing that makes that strong is that in canvassing for interest in 22 Clark, there's no neighbor that is either
Right, in that case, but.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And
let's
so-
say 20 Clark was interested, but we know 24 is coming up, like, we should maybe hold that and not.
So how that's a great question. So basically we send offers to purchase to, assessment, planning, code, mayor's office basically. And then ultimately city council has to approve that. So probably during that time, if we said, okay, 24 Clark could be something that we get, maybe this is a buildable lot. But maybe if we hear from neighbors and they're saying, no, we really want this to be a vacant lot, or excuse me, a side lot where there's someone who's been, worrying about the property, then yeah, those are the kind of the decisions that have to weigh, and city council has an opportunity to weigh in on that if a plan to sell it was provided. And then if no plan to sell is provided, then to Councilman's point, we do exactly that. We would basically just be banking it, waiting for if there's a nearby strategic property or otherwise, and then now that becomes a more buildable lot.
I think what we've discussed in terms of adjusting the trajectory of the side lot conversations, thus far, I believe we're aware the offers to purchase are sent out in conversation with the family that pursued 193 Matthews. They really suggested that if council is interested in how lots are being considered rather than the offer to purchase going out and then council getting involved after the fact when a family has identified their interest in neighborhood, has identified how they would love to use the lot, to right size that a bit where if parcels are identified just like on this list where Robert then immediately was able to look at 22 and think of 24 Clark, our opportunity to be involved in whether it's side lot potential, vacant parcels, like those conversations before that offer to purchase goes out, so that we can engage in redevelopment and canvassing. I mean, you have a very active city council right now, familiar with canvassing, familiar with knocking on neighbors' doors and having these kinds of conversations, so interested in being more of a part of certainly the side lot piece.
I would say that in equal parts where we proactively reach out to the nearby neighbors, we receive offers to purchase unprovoked from places that own city property. So someone will come and say, look, I have an offer to purchase this. The other thing that I'll say is that due to the sheer number of these in the city, I would love a problem where we have no vacant lots left because people have built on all of them. But because it is a non-zero cost to maintain these things, from a practical standpoint, a lot of these vacant lots, we really should be looking to get under private control and not be sending out mowing crews. It's really inefficient. These kind of, all of these dots all across the map. It takes a lot of time. They can, if it's raining like it is right now, they can grow and they become eyesores themselves because of the challenges in maintaining them. So we do want to get rid of a lot of side lots and a lot of vacant lots in the city. I don't think that we are at a point where the development demand for construction in any way, shape, or form meets kind of the number of lots that we have. I think that we can definitely find, whether it's through Block by Block, Habitat for Humanity, anyone who's interested in new construction on these lots, they're going to run out of resources before we run out of vacant lots.
And so the vacant lots list about 133, if I'm looking at the one that you sent us correctly. Are those based on the vacant lot registration, demolition tracking, all of the above?
That's based on what city parks are mowing. That's where it comes from. Now, the other thing is, after this block by block round, right, we've put out the notice, we've had people interested, there will be a timeline where these groups of entities will be applying to the state. We'll have a pretty good idea about here's the point in time, 2025, interest in the vacant lots. Mentioned it's 100 and so. Let's say 20 or 25 of them have interest from block by block. That still means that a lot of these, for one reason or another, as of today, just don't have development interest. And not all of them, like I mentioned, we shouldn't be sidelotting 114 Henry because these become kind of strategic parcels, but a lot of them are going to be like kind of the one-offs. Property next to you, Nate, on Frederick. Could it be built on? Maybe, but it's probably just a good side lot candidate.
So there's no,
Like when you say side lot, it's always with the idea that it's gonna be just like garden lawn predominantly.
Yep, extension of the existing and then combined with that other property.
So
wait,
maybe I'll ask my question.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm thinking, just like doing this in real time, but like with the 155 Murray, there's like a rental property like right next to it. And
I'm very curious about it now, because it seems to be the actual backyard of 157 Murray. Like, did they just stop paying taxes on the, or no, it was Anzaru, so.
It was.
So 157.
I don't know who. Oh, that's someone calling in. I was going to say we could pull up and look at the history, but what my guess is, and I don't know this, I haven't looked it up.
Yeah, no, that's.
Look at the GIS. I bet Andrew picked it up from the county auction back when he was allowed to buy county auction properties. That's what I'm guessing. I can't see what other way that property would be picked up.
Anyway, well, sorry. I think we talked about ADUs before, and I think I think it would be more like satisfying to me if there was like a side lot that also allows for like the detached ADU, so there would be the opportunity for more units. Like,
yep.
And there's like, in that case, it like looks like it would be possible, but like some of the other, I'm sure some of the other side lots could kind of do this.
So the difference with that is that if it were to be, and I agree with you, and I think that would be good, that the sale of those would have to be like a fair market sale for a vacant lot, which is usually in the thousands and not $300, $400, $500 as like the side lot is, because they're going to combine them. But yeah, I mean, we as part of outreach on these, we could include look, the side lot could be used for the new green space or continuation of yards to be maintained, or in districts where it's possible, the construction of accessory dwelling units in where there's in the R2 district or wherever that is.
is there so we have this vacant lot list for the 133. You've said the side lot potential, you said strategic redevelopment potential. Is there a list somewhere that actually, I'll use the word itemizes, that's not quite right, but breaks out which ones have been considered for which?
There has not been, I mean, I did this in preparation for the meeting, but on that side lot list, there's nothing that has been done where it's like, each property is given some sort of rating or some sort of, notes. I just would say that like on a lot of them, they're just places where the side lot interest is not there. There's no owner occupied properties. The property next door to say a side lot has a history of code violations. And so we wouldn't want to sell property to someone who's a repeat code offender, that sort of thing. And that has been in place for before I was mayor, my predecessor, et cetera.
This vacant lot list, you've called it the side lot list, like, is that one and the same? Is the vacant lot list?
The list, the Excel list that I provided you, vacant lot list, we can call it, yeah. There's no like side lot list of other eligible. And there's things on there that are not even, I would call technically vacant lots, but more public areas that could be sold, but are really kind of part of the public right of way, that are mowed.
I think I figured out how to explain it. So we discussed the fact that turning things into permanent side lots means that there's less buildings, which means there's less, in the long term, less taxes, because the lots pay less taxes than if it were building. When you do pull a permit to make improvements on your house, then you could be reassessed, as I understand. Is that the case when someone adds a side lot onto their property because it should make their property more valuable? How does that work or not work?
Yeah, when the property is combined, it can affect assessment. I don't know whether or not there's been reassessments. It would probably be a small amount, but it is an extension of the land value. I'm sure that can trigger a change in assessment.
But we don't.
Do they always merge the parcels, or is that up to the owner when they?
It's required as part of the side lot program. Because what could happen is, what happens in a lot of these cases, 155 may be one of the examples where, well, I'll keep paying taxes on my house, but I won't pay taxes on the vacant lot that's next to it.
Yeah.
So the vacant lot gets foreclosed. Well, nobody wants the vacant lot, so all that sort of stuff. We want to merge, and we want it to be one responsible owner for maintenance.
One of the things that came up during, this was 2018, but during task force conversations, a lot of the nonprofits, as well as some private landlords and developers, were asking if a regular discussion could be hosted around the vacant lots. I would say the county and blanking on his name, who previously had your property office, was really more involved from a county perspective, so we didn't drill down into city conversations
Like
per
that.
se. Yes, thank you. But I'd be, when this list is sent out, is it sent out routinely? Is it only sent out when there's, I know you just sent it out with the block by block. How routine or regular is the effort to convene kind of interested partners and talk through redevelopment potential? In
my experience with how housing is built, right? So let's say single family home construction in the city. Doesn't happen, right? It happens maybe in the last 5 years, there's been a handful. That's typically happening
Including in my district.
There you go, yeah, and near me on West End Ave. But what you're seeing with those is that those are new construction of homes. They're typically very, very high in value, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 homes, and that's probably their value after construction. The construction costs maybe more than that. They're being built on rather large lots in very nice neighborhoods. So that's what we've seen in terms of single family construction. As it relates to affordable housing construction, that's been happening through multi-unit projects that require a lot of land. Block by block is really the first opportunity where the state's been saying, no, we want to incentivize these smaller scale projects. So I would love the development community to say, we want to get our hands on the city of Binghamton's vacant lots. Those vacant lots, given the cost of construction, are just not conducive in today's economy with interest rates, cost of construction, labor, to build anything that you're going to make money on.
Did you send out that article to everyone?
Oh, the Syracuse one? I just sent it. Syracuse, there's a guy that's trying to show that you can build houses and that property values post-COVID are finally high enough to build in Syracuse with no
Well,
grants.
you shrink the subsidy down to $100,000 worth of subsidy per single-family house.
So he's trying to prove that there's a path forward that doesn't involve waiting and waiting and waiting.
But he basically got the lots given to him by whatever, their land bank, and then got it figuring out, pencil out to $100,000 subsidy.
So, but that 100,000 that goes into it now is, when the home is built, is it a, income qualified purchaser? Is it just on the open market?
I think the plan for those, I think one was open market, one was gonna be affordable housing, but it's, you have to get them, you have to qualify them, it's basically costing, 450,000 or so to build them, and they figure they'll be able to sell in the market for 350.
Okay. So someone buying a $350,000 home in Binghamton
Not, yeah.
is not going to match the neighborhood characteristics of a lot of these lots.
Nope. Anyway.
The other thing I'll say too is that.
We're moving closer, yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing too is that, vines, right? I would love vines to say, hey, we're expanding neighborhood gardens, a lot of different places. I think they're at a capacity where every time they're looking at a next garden, they're being very strategic and pretty discriminate on how, where those are and
I mean,
how many they're taking on.
we're running out of people that want to garden,
Exactly.
and their resources to take care of them are probably out.
Yeah.
And AmeriCorps just got cut.
Yeah.
So zooming back out a little bit, if we look at Fayette Street at the end of Fayette, and we have control of 2 and 3 and 4.5, are we looking at the other issues? I mean, if you go right down next to 3, 5 Fayette is, not. I think it's all boarded up and
At the corner property?
It's the corner one's the commercial one, right? So before that,
Okay.
between, I think the corner one, I don't know if that number's on there or not, but just behind that corner, that multi-story corner one.
Mhm.
But also including the multi-story corner one. So like, are we looking at that? City has control of several buildings down there that are in dire straits, probably ready to be torn down, right? But what about the ones that are very nearly on the precipice? Are we monitoring the whole thing as kind of a group, a set, a neighborhood, as far as
Yeah, and
how the city can step in? I mean, it's pretty dire looking.
it is. So we're hopeful that one of the block by block nonprofits will take on a center city project, right? So whether it's, specifically on Fayette Street, or look at what's available, can they acquire things that are privately owned vacant lots? That's what we're hopeful of. But again, the issue becomes is identifying a developer or nonprofit that wants to take on a project like that. The one property on the corner has over the years had permits pulled and done some things, but obviously hasn't completed anything. So getting the properties across the street that are not only in bad shape, but some of the worst properties from a criminal standpoint in the city, if not the worst right now, that's important to try to change the characteristics of the block.
I think my primary concern has been, will continue to be the demolition of units that are, so not questioning the need to demolish per se, but demolition of units available to or being utilized by our lowest income residents without redevelopment that provides housing to the city. And so, like, so concerned with the side lot program. We talked about it being green space in perpetuity, so we're reducing our housing stock. Demolition accomplishes the same in terms of, initially at least, reducing the stock, especially when a unit is occupied. How are we making sure we're at least doing everything we can? Because we've seen a lot of revitalization, we've seen blight removal in terms of urban renewal, but that's still pushing out and pricing out the residents who need housing the most.
So if we have a property that is in need of demolition, right? It's probably also a property that can be broken into by neighborhood kids. It's a property where there can be squatters. It's a property that our fire department has to respond to, and putting out the fire puts them in danger. That happened with these Anzor properties. It's happened all of the time. So there's kind of a short-term public safety issue when you have a vacant blighted property. That has to be corrected. And the demolition of that property in a lot of these cases is how we abate. 22 Clark is a great example. You know, as soon as we were able to get a hold of that, demolish it, we needed to do it from a neighborhood safety standpoint. That is really the key. If there are properties that don't have to be demolished, moving forward, say it's from, you know, the county forecloses and there's 10 properties, there's going to be 3 or 4 that are just so bad that they have to be demolished from a public safety standpoint. There's a few more that the land bank can put together in terms of rehabs. And then the rest of them, we work with First Ward Action Council, Greater Ops, anybody and anyone who's interested in dealing directly with the county to gain those properties and do a project for rehab.
At what point do we get the list of the foreclosure list of what the county is dealing with in the city of Binghamton limits? So I get constant calls like, oh, my neighbor never pays their taxes, they, this, that, the other. What point do we know if those properties are gonna be ones that we can be starting to?
I don't know when the redemption, because I think people can like redeem them up until the last moment, but that's all public and it's been filed with the courts, and Broome County Real Property would have that list.
We briefly established a protocol with the real property. It went away during COVID, just like most things, but briefly established with my real property like a routine distribution of that foreclosure list to the development community, to the affordable, to the nonprofits who are also interested in development, to interested community members. But I think we only saw 3 kind of email threads of that before COVID hit.
So here's the other thing too is, sorry, I don't want to cut you up. We're obviously not in the county building here, but here's how I think about these things, especially now with this decision about you can't just auction them off for the highest bidder into the money, right? So one of the few incentives that Broome County had to continually run the auction is now not there anymore. They can't use it to balance the budget. So the auction, which I've always not liked, that process becomes less and less valuable. So the county is the one that gets these properties, and this is talking about, like moving forward. So from a county perspective, and I know I'll be a good relationship with folks in the county legislature, what is the process for those properties? Is there a way that instead of going to auction, that those properties are provided to a broad spectrum of development community people that can do multi-residential, nonprofits or community-based housing providers that can, like the First Ward Action Council, pick up 6 or 7 within a certain neighborhood and go after state grant funding. The county has to be the ones that do that. Obviously, the city can advocate for that, but
I think I'm still a bit stuck on, so you mentioned short-term public safety issues with blighted properties, and again, that have to be demolished. But I think I'm still stuck on, there's no benchmark or threshold that determines have to be demolished. And I think that's likely informed by the conversations that we've had around 42 Fayette, because it was initially introduced as a property that had to be demolished, but we've since seen through inspection, through engineer reports, that there is redevelopment or rehab, or not redevelopment, rehab potential. So I'm still stuck on who and how the determination of this building has to be torn down gets made.
By the city's elected officials, of which I'm one, and city council is the other. So 42 Fayette, right? Can it be rehabbed? Yes. Is it practical that it will be rehabbed? That's, I think, the question. And there's a lot that's going on with 42 Fayette, but in conversations with code and the people who walk through the building, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of work. And if it becomes a public project or anything involving prevailing wage, that those numbers continue to go up. So what is the potential, or what is the probability that there is going to be either Mr. Sidorsky or another entity that's going to look at that property and say, we're willing to put in all of this money to fix it and get it into code compliance, and be able to either make money off of it or receive the funding that's available? So that's an example of, is it likely, is it probable to happen based on our last 10 years, at least for me, 10 years looking at all of these different properties. And there have been success stories, right? 47 North is a success story where we were able to, because of its historic nature, because it was important, we're able to go after grant funding. 182 Leroy, or excuse me, that's my address, 182 Hawley Street, I'm not ready to give up on yet quite, because it has some historic potential. But I'm also in the back of my mind thinking, you know, if you're looking at hundreds of dollars per square foot to rehab this, are there going to be entities that are willing to do it? I don't think there is, but it at least has another thing going for it where it's intact with the rest of a net residential neighborhood. It's historic, it's very large, and there could be other options. To me, in my opinion, 42 Fayette doesn't really fall into those categories. It's got a commercial building on one side, it's got a commercial parking lot on the other. It's in very, very rough shape and requires a lot of money to fix. And I just don't see someone following
I
through
think
with it.
we're also, and maybe the crux of this is we're asking different questions. So can it be rehabbed? Yes. You've mentioned hundreds of thousands of dollars. We are working on determining what that actual amount is. But where you're asking, is it practical? And I'll just say me, I'm asking, how can we prevent the displacement of the individual who has been staying there? And that goes beyond 42 Fayette, where we're talking about, which is why I get stuck on, we're reducing the number of units available to residents who need it the most. So I'm asking a different question, and if that's not so practical in terms of revitalization interests, is a very different thing from potentially impacting the stability of a human's housing. And that's consistently going to be the angle that I'm approaching any of this from.
So, this committee, 42 Fayette, what would be the end goal? Would it be to just sell it to Paul Sidorsky? Have him fix it up?
Transfer ownership. That's what we've
Okay.
been talking about from the beginning.
And that's been provided, and we've not received a response back.
Because we just scheduled the second opinion for structural engineering.
Okay.
And so it's not because it's stalled, it's moved forward.
Yeah. But if the individual, again, talking practically here, can afford to pay the appraised value of the property, right? Is that consistent with being represented by legal services and being, displaced and having no other option?
No one's talking about, well, you might be, but I would say we've not been talking about paying the appraised value of the property when it was initially offered for $1,000 or less. So,
but that was in consideration of demolition. If we're going to transfer a standing multi-unit residential building, we cannot sell that for something that's less than fair market value. That would be a gift. We can't sell someone a lot that doesn't meet, it is a private citizen.
I think and that's where we enter into a piece of this conversation collectively that we've not yet entered into yet. I know that you and Mike have met, but exactly what that looks like once we get the full structural engineer report, I think that conversation comes after. But it's still like, so theoretically, because 42 Fayette can't be the only one, is what I'm trying to, and maybe we can't land on the metric. Maybe I'm being too, trying to get too specific here, but it can't be the only one that at some point the departments involved in making a decision about demolition assumed it wasn't practical when in fact it could have been. And that's why I'm trying to nail down a threshold.
So, and I would say that it becomes in some cases quantitative, but a lot of cases, so again, in that example before, if we look at 10 properties from Broome County, there's going to be ones that just driving by, it's like, oh my gosh, this is fire damage. It's like, it's a no-brainer, right? And then there's going to be some where code goes in and says, there's a hole in the roof. Upon further review, it's a very, very clear-cut case. And yes, there will be times that come up. I can't think of an example where, I don't know, that this is, what can we do here? Maybe the land bank looks at it and
There have
says,
been
no.
edge cases that have come through CAUD by the land bank that, and CAUD has asked those questions, hey, it's really gone.
Yeah.
Salvage it, and if you go down and there's, massive holes in the roof and the, foundation is half fallen and stuff. And so, but yeah, there are going to be edge cases. And
But
I don't know how we catch those in a proactive manner, I think is what the goal is here. Or there's going to be, I think there will be some friction and points of disagreement.
And what for me
on those edge cases.
tips the scales is that public safety piece, where, look, the city owning these properties or anyone owning these properties that are allowed to be vacant are going to be broken into, they're going to be squatted in, they're going to have.
Those people don't have housing.
But
So they're.
but
Do you see like the catch-22 there? Like
but-
that's
squatting is not a victimless crime, right? It puts first responders in danger. It like on all these cases, if you have people that are lighting fires in vacant properties to stay warm, okay, that is not a victimless situation. Our first responders have to go into those situations, put themselves at risk, and one of our first responders died because of a fire that was set on vacant property.
no one's saying that squatting is a victimless crime.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is that from a public safety perspective, from the neighbors talking about how they're worried because there's a vacant property, animals, infestations, whatever, to me, in a lot of these cases, tips the scale where it's like, look, we have to demolish it because of the short-term public safety issues that are caused by it.
Short term, to use Robert's word, proactive, preventive. Like that's so much of our conversation on council has been proactive and preventive. If we're only looking at short term issues, we're not. That's why we're in the situation that we're in. That's why we have squatters. That's why we've increased encampment sites, because we have an increase in unhoused individuals who are not able to access housing that they can afford. So at some point, we have to get on the other side of just like, we need to expand our definition of public safety to include being able to provide homes to residents who need it, because that actually prevents crime, prevents squatting, prevents in a way that first responders are responding to it, and we could actually wipe out the need to respond in many cases. That's the end goal. Robert, exactly that, catching it, even if they are edge cases, in a proactive manner. All of it, I know we're just at the hour. Any question I've had, like for me, in terms of the processing, conceptualizing any protocol, I need all of the information first. So this was extremely helpful, and I appreciate you putting it together. doing the meeting. I mean, I'd like to continue to mull over, talk with others on council, but
I think between like vacant lots, vacant properties, anything that's coming through like foreclosure, I just think the process would be better. And I don't want you to be the only like set of eyes that are making the determination, because there might be somebody that sees a different opportunity that maybe you don't see, and maybe that's just because it's like, oh, this is a property that's on my block, and I can work on it, and I have the resources to do so, even if it's not like something that I'm looking to get an ROI on. It's just something I want to like maintain in my community. So there might be other opportunities like that. Like I understand like what your process is and like the rationale behind it, but I think there's like should be more like kind of openness around how we process what is city owned and vacant stuff. I hear a lot about vacant properties all the time. I think like when it always comes up when there's like, oh, there's a housing shortage, but there's like all these vacant houses around. Like there's a disconnect there. So I think we can make improvements. And I'm trying to do my best to find successful programs that like model after to see like how we move forward with this. Because I know there's like not enough funding to rehab everything. But how do we introduce like private funding? There's gotta be something better than what we're doing right now. And I think people are asking for that.
Yeah, so you have the list of the vacant property, or excuse me, the vacant property list. I think you also have the registered vacant list. Right?
We have that, but
Wait,
the public
is that not
doesn't
the same
have that. No.
Like the actual like buildings, like registered vacant buildings.
The city doesn't own the buildings, they're just
Yeah, the
vacant.
city doesn't own them. but-
right.
The ones that are on the vacant property list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People have
Yeah,
property turned in there.
they distribute it to council annually, or they're
Oh.
supposed to.
Well, has
It's
it-
in the-
because I haven't been on council for a year.
But I'm right to that. You
I was
guys
gonna
can
say,
do- you guys have
there
that,
there is a
It's
deadline,
on.
we
Yeah.
received it at some point when I was president, because we went
It's
after
on
it, because it's in the
control.
charter.
Yeah.
I need to link it on my doc sheet, or otherwise it won't be complete.
It's in, yeah.
So again, so that like from the availability of things, council has the same information that I have. I mean, I don't have any extra kind of stuff. And the point is that is the difficulty. So whether it's the rehabilitation of vacant properties and the amount of grant money that it takes to do that, to make these things affordable, or the fact that this year, the city of Binghamton supported 3 applications as part of the low-income housing tax credit program. YWCA, Stadium Lofts, and Jerry Willer's project. Only one of them got funded, right? All 3 of them should have been funded. That's the need that we have. The state's not going to do it. The state is going to fund 1 9% and probably 1 4% in the city of Binghamton every year. And are going to only do 3 or 4 across the entire southern tier. You know, I wish that process was better, because then we could, instead of building, Jerry's project 38 units, we could have been building 38 plus the Ys plus the stadium lots.
I think impacting the low-income housing tax credit program is likely outside of our purview.
Yeah, okay.
Sure. No, this is, I mean, I'm committed to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, it's like if you dig like through Craigslist or like some of the sites that have, there's people selling something that I'm sure if it was city owned and you were looking at it and you get complaints about it, it'd be subject to demolition, but there's still people that are like, there's value here, and I'm gonna try to like flip this like really rundown place
Mhm.
on like speculation, but something with an ROI on it. So it's weird.
There's externalities too, where people take over vacant properties, pull permits, or don't pull permits and start doing things and then leave them unfinished. 109 Oak is a good example of that. The Dixie Hotel properties, right now are
Is the one on the red one for the
that went through a couple iterations where people had high hopes and could make it work. And I know talking to COD at one point, COD, pushed back a little bit on demo. Again, the Dixie Hotel properties where, I've been asking questions about what the status is and there's been nothing happening. So those are things where some of those are vacant, some of those are occupied. Private entity took it over, started demolition on it or, removal of debris and just stopped. So that's another thing that can happen in these projects.
So if there is that clause, is there an action that the city can take, like nudge it along? It's like you gotta either move forward or like
Yes.
give it up.
So basically when you come in, you pull a permit, you have a year to complete that work. So this is a pretty long amount of time. So as long as, it's within that year, but once that year goes up, it's either it's a vacant building you have to secure and you have to, board up and make sure that it's safe. You can't have a construction fence around it, or this is an active construction site and there needs to be activity and movement and contractors that are insured and on site. It's that in-between phase that we can't accept.
Is there somebody that is just monitoring? Okay, it's like these are the permits that went out last May. So I'm looking at all the permits for May 2024 or whatever, April, when they're checking all those sites. Be like, is anything?
I don't know if that happens, but that's a good question.
I mean, I will, again, the commercial building on Fayette Street, you mentioned that might be, that's one that's like, all right, stuff was happening, stuff wasn't happening, but another one that really comes to mind, I just don't know the address, is 92 Glen, the old warehouse carpet building, which was mostly converted into residential and then stopped for some reason. I feel like that's one that we could be checking up on into. That's like.
So that's an Answer property. That was a former Answer property, but that we didn't take over.
We didn't get it, right? Yes.
No. So that I think could, with a couple quick things, receive a certificate of occupancy.
That's, I think, like a dozen units in there or something. That's, but do we know who has control of that now?
I don't know. I would imagine a bank. I would imagine that either if they haven't foreclosed yet, they're going to foreclose.
I think that was is it Erin Micah or Nietzsche, the legislator, realtor? I think she had posted like a big list of some big properties.
So I think that's something that's like a governmental nudge. Making the right connections could make that a viable functioning property. Or actually, if it's a commercial, a viable residential project. So it was very close.
Do you know, this is separate from that. This is another question.
Yeah.
That's good. I realized so one last question with the side lot program, and I sent this to Madeline 2 weeks ago, but haven't gotten a response. Are there any discussions with adjacent homeowners currently in process regarding moving forward with offers to purchase?
No, the canvas that we did, we basically haven't received any response. 30 Thorpe, I think. Well, no, because 31 Travis and 193 Matthews have already been voted on. So no, there's nothing that is currently being advanced or for someone who think is a potential for a side lot.
This is a little off agenda, but we talked at some point about doing something about all the Airbnbs. It came back to me because I had, for my other job, ended up driving someone and they were like, oh, I'm staying in the south side. And so they said, oh, you should ride with Sadasa back from dinner because, no point paying for a taxi. There's no hotels on the south side. And I was like, where am I going? And then they gave me the street and it's like right near me. And they're like, yeah, I'm staying at an Airbnb. And I'm like, are you staying with a family with this Airbnb? And they're like, oh no, it's private, just me. And I'm like, yeah, that's illegal. So I don't know if we have any, it was just kind of like a reminder that it's going on within my district and that these are places that people could be living.
Yeah, so basically that's, I think, a kind of a question for council, right? What do you want to do with Airbnbs on the spectrum of let
I mean,
it happen, or
Isn't it an
make it
enforcement
illegal.
question because they're already illegal?
Well, it's an enforcement question, but much like cannabis, right?
Yeah.
How effective is our current enforcement ability? Because right now, Airbnbs or bed and breakfasts have to go before the planning commission, and they require that the person who's
So live
the
there.
purveyor, yes. How do you get into proving that based on Airbnb listings, right? The amount of investigatory work that we have our one zoning enforcement officer to go through each one of those could be all Greg Buell does for the next months and months and months. Now,
Is it that hard? Is it not? I mean, they're listed on one website or two,
Yeah.
Airbnb, Burrow probably. And we have a list of whatever approved ones we have, which are like
None.
none.
Basically
Very
none.
few.
yes.
There's a few.
One.
There's a few.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
we all know that one,
yeah.
yeah.
But does not Airbnb have a process for, if we give them notice, none of these addresses are licensed in the city of Binghamton?
Yes,
Take down
Yeah,
notices?
take them all
essentially?
down, yeah.
I think we can, and I think, you know, but gathering the information to,
They
The other
either went
thing-
through the process or they didn't. And then
Yes.
your question is the next step of, okay, they went through the process and they're not really complying. But
here's
for
a
the
question.
first wave of action is
Here's a question though.
everybody.
So I decide for graduation weekend, I list my property on Airbnb and I do it one weekend a year. Is that something that we can enforce against? Is a 2-day rental of your property something that is subject to planning commission enforcement? It's a legal question I don't know the answer to, but my guess would be that someone would say that it's a one-time, one weekend use, you know? It's not a change of use from a single family residence to a bed and breakfast.
Just like the garage sale exceptions for garage sales, essentially. I mean,
Yeah. Now, if a property is
use, if you will.
de minimis use, if a property is owned by an LLC, right, and it is appearing every week on Airbnb, that's a different thing. That's to me a commercial use. But I think what maybe I would want input from city council on, right, is how aggressive do we want to be on these things? And if the answer is very aggressive, I will support that 100%.
I haven't heard any complaints in my district, but I go to the Southside Neighborhood Assembly and I have heard complaints from Rebecca's district. I don't know how many people have reached out to you about it, but they've definitely brought it up during
No
neighborhood
neighbors
reached
reached out to me.
What I am
because
getting,
the Southside West.
what I am
Well,
getting.
that's
Sure, sorry.
Well, and that's the piece of it. Like, to me, it is very much it's low on a priority list in my perspective because the use of a property, that commercial use, the profit potential is so far removed from what most of Southside East is experiencing. So
But the other thing too is that, so let's say, just to throw it out there, say there's 50 Airbnbs in the city of Binghamton in single family homes or 2 families that are being used year round for short-term rental housing. That is taking 50
Right,
housing
unit,
units
yeah.
off the market that
Right.
could be a single family home,
Right.
and then the trickle down effect that has on all types of housing.
Right.
This is the New York City, why they banned them.
The sort of thing in my district, been getting a lot of chatter on and feedback on has been the longer end of short-term rental, particularly all of the medical techs and travel
Yeah.
nurses and stuff that are coming
Which we
in
also have.
for 1 to 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are like clubhouses, essentially. You've got half of those bedrooms, and the impact is as much as far as parking and coming and going at weird hours and stuff is some of these neighborhood folks as much, if not worse, than students.
And these are listed on Airbnb?
So those different websites,
There's-
Furnished Finders.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Like for travel nurses,
Yep.
I've got a 3-month contract at Wilson, I need a, I
And-
really,
And there's some of those people that take kind of regular rentals, and there's other ones that are throwing a bunch of people in a house, and it's
Like a frat house for
Yeah.
professionals.
interesting. So, yeah, what I would,
Which of course we need our medical professionals.
I think-
I know, that's
a balance.
a balancing test.
so, Phoenix District and probably Hadassah, your district, would be the big, Airbnb rentals, you think?
Yes,
So-
yes. Well, the complaints that I get are from her
South
district.
side west.
South side west.
Okay.
So yes. Former fifth district.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and then it's not something that I've followed much, other than like I literally drove to one the other night and I was like, oh, this is an everything.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What I would say is that
Walking distance from my house.
I haven't engaged with the bigger property officer probably in the last month on this. But let's get some feedback from council on that exact thing, because I think that there are very minimal resource things that we can do.
I mean, the first step is just to send out a scary notice to everybody that's listed online saying that they need to apply to go before planning commission. And that, I mean, that's the first step. is to just-
Love that, that'll be it.
Well, you know, that's the first step is just to notify people that we're paying attention. And then give people a little bit of time to try that process. And then if there's, at some point, you know, we draw a line somewhere and say, okay, if you didn't go through that process by now and you didn't apply to even start going through the process, because then we're gonna get you removed from all these websites. And then the next question will be, okay, now we've got everybody to get through the process that's gonna bother going through the process, then we figure out how much enforcement level resources we want to spend on making sure that they follow through on their commitments made before the planning commission, right? They're gonna say stuff on the record.
Your point is that is the juice worth the squeeze as far as limited resources, but I think.
Well, I don't think warning letters is hard.
No, I agree.
We're also getting occupancy tax for those
Right.
properties
In theory.
through
Yeah.
Airbnb to the county.
Here's an idea. You can only run an Airbnb if you completely renovated a vacant home. You get a license to upgrade
It's a
it.
good question. I mean, look, you know, in places like obviously Saratoga Springs deal with it at a scale that dwarfs ours, but
Yeah, but I mean,
But the question is, you know, do Airbnbs have a place in the city? I can see both sides of it. It's you know,
I don't
taking
mind, they
away,
just have to go through the planning commission. I mean,
But I
but
think,
there's a process, you can't just open a business with no permit. I mean, this is the rental
well,
registry discussion that you're talking about, like,
operating a business without a permit, you can't.
right,
You can't. I mean, you apply, you can open up something by right, and if that business is, you know, is in violation, then we do these things, but we don't have a licensing program for businesses. But I think the bigger question though is, what these Airbnbs are doing would never be legal under our current laws, because the people aren't living there likely when they're renting them out.
Right.
It's not a bed and breakfast, it's
right,
a short-term rental property. And maybe there should be a distinction. in
right.
those.
And meanwhile, I'm dealing with, you know, through my connections, people at the university who'd like to purchase homes in Binghamton who aren't able to purchase in Binghamton and therefore are purchasing in Vestal. There are people that would like to buy in Binghamton, that have money, that would like to purchase nice homes and pay taxes here, and they're Airbnbs. I don't know.
Okay. So get us some feedback on that, and we'll go from there.
Excuse me, I have to go get my notes for the finance committee meeting before that
Which
starts.
is
13 minutes, so.
All right.
Or should I move to adjourn, maybe we want to
Sure.
keep on? I will make one. Second.
All in favor?
See you all
Meeting adjourned.
See you all in a few minutes.
Can you?
Oh, right.